Lashing is a fun and trendy way to make jewelry. We're seeing it all over in fashion right now, and there are a lot of ways to lash with different materials. It's easy to do, and I know you're going to love it. Hi, I'm Patty, a jewelry designer here at Fire Mountain Gems and Beads, and today I'll be showing you how to make this gorgeous lashed bracelet that uses leather, silk thread, and rainbow fluorite. A link to the list of materials for this piece is in the description box below.
Get our email newsletter for beading news, sale announcements, new product announcements, and more. Link is in the description below.
Lashing is when you use one material in a repeated wrapping motion along the length of another material to lash them together or wrap on embellishments. You can lash with thread, cord, and even wire. Here are a few fun examples of other ways to use lashing in jewelry. You can see this wrapped lash bracelet that's very similar to what we're doing today with the fluorite. It's also wrapped on leather with thread, but we've got round beads here, and it's a long length that you wrap around your wrist. In this bracelet, I have wrapped wire around leather. Isn't that great? Beautiful. And in both of these earrings, I have lashed on embellishments to the bases. Here it's a hoop, and here it's other pieces of wire. Okay, let's look at the materials that are in this bracelet. We're starting with some 2mm leather cord. I love this natural color. It really complements the rainbow fluorite. Some silk thread. Some fluorite tube beads. Aren't those gorgeous with all the variations in colors? We also have a black lip shell button that the rainbow effect really goes well with the fluorite. And then a few tools. There's really not much you need to do this. A ruler is kind of nice. It's not necessary for good eyeballing lengths, but it's a nice tool to have. Some nice sharp scissors. I actually like to label my scissors that are for fabric and cord as fabric only, so no one uses them for paper. That dulls them out. And the special wide eye needle, I'll show you why that's so special in a minute when we get to using that. We'll also use a little bit of GS Hypo Cement. You can see my tube is pretty well worn. I use it all the time. It's a great precision tip for really getting into the knot that we'll be making. Okay, for this bracelet, we're going to start by measuring out the leather cord. We'll have 22 inches of that. So let's go ahead and start with that. That's a good base number for this kind of bracelet. If you want one for a larger wrist, you might want to cut it a bit larger. So we'll snip that off. Okay. And then to calculate the length of the thread, it's about 11 times the lashed length of your bracelet. Now, that's not the overall length because you have to have a little length for the knots here and the space between the beads. I'm just talking about the beads that are lashed on. So the beads that are lashed on, it's a little over 6 inches. I'd say lashed length over here is about 6.5 inches. And so 6.5 times 11, it's pretty close to 72, which is 7 feet. So we're going to go ahead and cut 7 feet of thread. If you're making a smaller bracelet, you can reduce it a little bit, but I find that more is better. That way you don't run out. What we're going to do is middle the leather cord. And what I mean by that is grab both ends in one hand and pull the cord taut so you find the middle. Once you've found the middle, you're going to take one end of your thread and put that parallel to your other thread. So you've got a little tail sticking out. You don't need a lot there. And you're going to make a simple knot. And I just want to check my loop and make sure it's the size that I want it to be. It's not getting too big or small, because you can still make adjustments now. I think I might pull it just a little tighter, like that. Okay, and before I really clamp that down and tighten it, I'm going to use a little bit of this GS Hypo Cement inside the knot to secure the knot and to make sure that that small thread stays in there. All right, then we're just going to tighten that knot to where we want it to be. That looks really good. Now that your knot has been created at this end and glued, you're going to go ahead and leave this little bit of tail. We'll cut that off at the end. The next thing we're going to do is find the end of this thread, which is here. And we're going to put that through this wide-eye needle. I told you that I'd show you the really great thing about this. So a lot of you might not have ever seen one of these, but a wide-eyed needle is special because it is exactly how it sounds. It's got a wide eye. So this needle is attached at both ends, but the center is split. So you've got to get in there. And the whole center comes apart like this. Isn't that great? And so if you have over 40 eyes like mine, or you just have a hard time seeing little things, you just thread your thread through there, and it's the simplest needle thread you've probably ever done. I just love it. Okay, so I'm going to keep my leather kind of out of the way of my thread as much as I can. And I'll show you how we're going to manipulate that. It's much easier to move the leather than the thread because there's so much thread. So the first thing we're going to do is wrap the thread around the leather, but I'm really going to do it like this. So I'm really moving the tail of the leather rather than the tail of the thread. So I've got a few wraps here. And I'm going to go ahead and grab my needle, and I'm just going to kind of pinch those wraps between my thumb and forefinger of my non-dominant hand there. And I'm going to grab my needle, and I'm just going to make sure my thread is clear. I'm going to kind of let it drop over to my side, kind of off the table, so it doesn't knot up. And then I'm just going to choose a bead. And when you're using the rainbow fluorite, there's so many variations. So I really like to make sure that whatever bead that I'm choosing is a different color than the last. So we get a really great kind of array as we go. Okay, gonna move this one out of the way. You can see how there's manipulating to be done there. So I let the bead fall all the way up to the leather on the top. And then I'm going to come around the leather on the bottom. And let me show you. I know you can't see under my fingers, but I'm going to try and create that triangle of space here. So I'm just going to hold the bead and grab my needle, and I'm going back through the bead once I've wrapped around that bottom leather. And then coming up through the back, because that's the direction that I'm wrapping. So you can see now I can let go of that bead and show you what's going on. So I've wrapped a few times, gone through the bead, around the bottom leather, back through the bead, and up around the back. And then I'm going to wrap around once, because my next bead will lie right next to that one. And go ahead and choose another bead. So I'm going to let my bead fall right against the top leather, just like that, around the bottom, and go back through the bead, and around the back. Just make sure it comes through nice and smoothly. And then once it's through, you can adjust your beads a little bit, make sure that they're kind of landing where you want them to. At this point, you can readjust the bead before it if you need to. Pull it tighter. And I like to just pull it taut and see how it's looking. It's looking really good. Now you'll notice on this bracelet that these bottom lashes are very straight and the top lashes go at an angle. That's just the nature of the piece. It's always going to be like that. So don't be discouraged if they don't look the same. One side will always be slanted, one side will always be straight. So we're just going to keep this up. Let me move to a piece that I've advanced a little more so you don't have to wait for me to lash them all on. So now I've got all of the beads lashed on. I've got quite a bit of extra thread here, and we're just tying a knot in the end. So at this point, I'm going to trim the thread to make it a little easier to work with. So the last thing we're going to do here to finish that off, I'm going to wrap this extra thread around the cord that it's naturally ending at here, just like that. I'm going to go ahead and make a square knot, just like you would in Scouts. Right over left. And I'm going to pull it down so there's just a little space left there. And then we do left over right. And my tail on one side is a little shorter. I didn't quite middle it, but that's going to be okay. We're going to still be able to make the knot. I'm going to go ahead and put that around and through. And I'm going to let a pliers help me get it through. These chain nose pliers are handy for so many things. I'm actually going to put my pliers through the knot and just grab that end. There we go. But this is why it's good to cut a little more cord than a little less. If we added any less, we would have a problem. Okay. So there's the knot that we want to have at the end, just a square knot. And that's really going to be hidden under your button closure. So you're not going to see it very well. And before we completely cut everything off, we're going to add some GS Hypo Cement, just like we did at the other end. Just a little drop somewhere inside the knot. That's good. Once your GS Hypo Cement has dried, you really only need to wait an hour or two. You can go ahead and cut off the tails of your knots and the tail of your thread here. Now that it's all trimmed up, we're going to add the button for the clasp. That is going to sit right on top of the knot. To do that, I'm going to use a little length of the same thread, and I'll grab my wide-eyed needle. So we'll get the thread through there, pull it nice and tight in that end. It really stays nicely. See that? And I'm just going to go through the knot. Just find a place where there's openings, and then around, and then back through. Like that. And then maybe I'll come around the other side, and we just want to secure that. So I'm going to go ahead and make a surgeon's knot here. So you just, almost like a square knot, you do the right over left. And when you do the left over right, go around twice on the second half. And pull that nice and tight. You can even use a drop of GS Hypo on that, but I don't really feel like it's necessary. The surgeon's knot is pretty secure. Okay. Now that that's nice and secure, I'm going to go back through the knot. Here we are. And then we can go through the bottom of the button, then through the other side of the top of the button, go back through that center of the knot is where I feel like it's easiest to get through. And you're just going to repeat that a couple of times to secure that button down. And there you have your gorgeous lashed bracelet. Really hope you've enjoyed this video. Make sure and sign up for our email list. The link to that is in the description below. And be sure and like, share, and subscribe. We'll see you next time.